Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This is Honest to God on AM 1160 The Quest, Atlanta's Catholic Radio. Super pumped to be here for a part 2 of Lord of the Rings. We got all veterans of varying knowledge of Lord of the Rings. At the very bottom of that pile is Cameron, who has never heard the term Lord of the Rings before today.
Is it Jesus with rings on his hand?
Kind of, yeah.
Oh, I gotcha.
And then at the very top is going to be Justin, I think. Not to toot your horn for you, but I feel like it needs to be tooteth, right? And then, as always, we've got producer Ben in studio. We also got Emma. We got Thomas. And then from the deepest, darkest depths of that which cannot be imagined to my right, may or may not be, Show Notes Benny. So we're excited to be here today. It's going to be great. We had a word last time for Show Notes Benny, something about a great nothingness.
Yes.
This is Lord of the Rings.
He's there beyond the doors of night.
There you go.
I think is where he is.
There beyond the doors of night, to my
deep.
right, may or may not be, right, sort of a Schrodinger's Benny, Show Notes Benny. All right, so let's get started. We got one fun fact apiece.
So I spent the last 3 days reading Lord of the Flies. Is that going to be?
It's the same thing.
Is it the same? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Did you make that joke last time we did this?
I
feel like somebody made that joke last time.
That's a good joke.
So it is a good joke. Yeah. Lord of the Flies is intense.
It's a great book.
Yeah, poor Piggy. Spoiler alert for Lord of the Flies, a book written like 70 years ago. Piggy does great.
I've actually never read Lord of the Flies or seen any content based on it. I've just heard tell. So
well,
I
joke's
know
on you because Cameron's an expert, and that's actually what we're talking about today.
I did read the summary of it.
Did you?
Yeah, in
for high
preparation
school or
for
something.
this. Yeah.
So let's start fun facts over here with Cameron. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, yeah. My fun fact is I dream every night.
Amazing.
That's not
Whoa.
fun at all. Like you mean like you remember the dream every night?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I thought you were just like
I don't dream some nights. So
Really? Yeah. Well, I have a friend who like hardly dreams at all.
Oh, I dream way too much.
Yeah,
I have the weirdest
I
dreams.
love it. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah.
I slept walked a few nights ago for the first time in like a decade. And I didn't just sleepwalk. I left my house. And when I finally kind of came to in flashes, right? Like I sort of remember this part. I was at my back door, like trying to convince my dog to let me in. It sounds like I was on hard drugs or drinking or something. I was not. I was in my underwear. It was like 40 degrees. And I sort of come to and I'm like, what am I doing here? I've been trying to like Jimmy the lock with a knife from like my big tool chest that's over there by the back door. It was weird. Scared my wife, and then I slept on the couch.
The whole crew at Papa John's was where you were actually.
Also, yeah, where I sleep. So, all right, so that's my fun fact. Thomas, what you got?
Okay, so this is pretty cool. So my whole family dressed up as characters of Lord of the Rings.
You don't say.
Yeah. I know it's like I'm telling you this for the first time. It was so fun because my daughters just got really into it because we just watched the first the trilogy. So now my oldest daughter is reading it. So
Awesome.
they're 12 and 10, and so the 12-year-old dressed up as Arwen, and then my 10-year-old dressed up as Eowyn, and then the boys were the hobbits.
Right.
So Frodo and Sam, which was so awesome. They both had little ring necklaces.
That's
like
super cool.
a chain with a ring around it,
That's
which was
really cool.
amazing.
Why did they both get one? That doesn't sound.
Because it came with two, and
Oh, okay.
what one does, the other one wants to do too.
That's fair. Okay.
Which is it made sense. It made sense at the time. And then I was Gandalf, and my wife was Galadriel, which was just
That's
perfect.
cool.
It was
That's beautiful.
perfect. But the coolest part of that was I was sick that night. I was actually really sick, so I got up for the picture, but I didn't go trick or treating with them. But I really wanted to do this because I had a gray cloak, like brownish gray cloak when he did the picture, and then when my kids saw
You were
me,
Gandalf the Gray.
I wanted to
Yeah.
get, because they went to they were close by. I wanted to get like a white
Shut
thing and
the
like
front
show up,
door.
and be like, I'm here, I'm back, just like to come back and
Next
totally
time,
make
tell
them-
me. I've got a great ghillie suit I can put on. I'll douse myself in lighter fluid. And I'll be a Balrog, and they'll come home and watch me throw you out the window and like jump after you, and then you can come back in later as Gandalf the White after they think you're dead. Like wait a couple of days, like file a police report. Like it'll be great. Can you imagine the look on their face?
It's amazing. I actually spent a lot of time watching coming home videos, like soldiers coming home to see their families.
Yeah.
So I imagine something like that.
Yeah, except it's a horrible, like trauma-inducing, Halloween prank for your young children. Yeah, no, it's a good idea. Yeah, well, yeah, we'll try that for our next Halloween episode.
Let's do it. I like it.
All right, Justin, what you got?
Okay, so I got a Tolkienian fun fact.
Heck yeah.
So Strider, aka Aragorn, actually started not as a human, but as a hobbit by the name of Trotter.
Like in the original like draft, or
In an early draft. I think this might have actually been like a good few years before Tolkien really took the Lord of the Rings seriously as a continued thing. You know, he's a very on-off kind of writer with that portion of the mythology. But yeah, so we could have all been singing Trotter's praises in one version of reality.
Strider and Aragorn sound way cooler.
Way cooler.
And I want to talk about the distinction in the names in a little bit too. But first, let's get to Emma over there. What you got, Emma?
I am a virtual farm owner on Heyday, so that's what I got going for me.
Does your farm have like a name? Do you have a name for your farm?
I don't remember because every 6 months I like re-download it, play it for 2 weeks, and delete it because I like play too much. And then so I started it in like 8th grade.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's just been
like
developing for like 5 years.
Wow.
That's amazing.
I'm on level like 47, which if someone out there's on like 123, that's gonna be really embarrassing, but it's fine.
So
it's doing really good.
I saw you playing a game earlier. Does that mean that this is that time period?
It is.
So if you're is Heyday like can you interact with other players?
Technically, yeah. Okay, so it's made by the same people that made Clash of Clans. So like you can join.
So you can like battle other farms.
No, that would be fun. But no, it's more so like you can join like a league, and then it's like you guys can help each other out. Like if someone needs something,
Can you
go
burn
in
down somebody else's farm?
No,
That'd be cool.
Scaring up
it's a little more humane than Clash of Clans. Clash of Clans sucks, man. I had it in middle school and I got bullied. I got cyber bullied on Clash of Clans. I was like in 6th grade.
By who?
The clan I was in, like my own people bullied me out of the app.
I'm sorry.
That's a fun fact.
That sounds rough.
You played Clash of Clans when she was.
No.
I did. That was me, Emma, and I am sorry.
No, it's okay.
I'm glad you brought Clash of Clans though, because this episode actually is brought to you by Clan MacLeod, right? The actual Scottish people who are really sick of all the jokes about Clan MacLeod because it was the name used in the Highlander movies and because of Clash of Clans. And I was supposed to read something for their $4 sponsorship fee, which is actually people in Scotland are just normal people. Please stop presenting us as small blonde guys with sideburns wearing kilts killing each other. So
Valid.
yeah, this episode
That's
of
valid.
Honest God brought to you by Clan MacLeod.
Clan MacLeod.
They're just like you and me. They wear normal amounts of clothes and they don't wear kilts that often anymore, and they don't burn down each other's villages.
So they're like human?
The Scots? Yep. That's
Really?
what it says right here.
Wasn't golf invented in Scotland too?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I love golf.
Okay, I love golf too, so that, okay. All right.
Do you love golf?
I do.
You do? Okay.
I
that's cool.
love it thinking about it. I don't like playing it.
That's fair. I totally.
You know what
I
I mean?
understand
Yeah,
that
I
so
love-
much.
yeah, I like playing it, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like thinking about it afterwards.
You know,
You got-
for Tolkien purposes, the Hobbits invented golf.
Really?
Oh.
Yeah.
There's a line about it in the
Hobbits-
Hobbit movie, actually, that's
Really?
actually to the books.
Really?
Interesting.
Are the hobbits supposed to be Scotsmen?
No.
Okay.
Not necessarily.
Do you have a Scotland hot take over there? You're from that side of the pond.
Scotland hot take. Oh, wow, that's the Lord of the Rings.
No, just in general. I'm just curious. Say
Lovely
something
people.
about the Scots.
Wonderful people. They wear shorts all year round. One of my very best friends is Scottish Sri Lankan, and his accent
Classic
is never
combination.
completely faded. Yeah, classic. No, absolutely classic. Yeah, no, really interesting guy. I've only crossed the border, as we say, like once or twice, 15 minutes.
Right.
Much to my detriment. It's a beautiful part of the world. A lot of my Instagram somehow must overlap with all of my Middle Earth content because I get a lot of like Scottish tourism shoots.
Oh, nice.
Like,
Cool.
Nice.
there's this one guy, I think he's called Andy the Highlander or something. He takes tours and tells people stories.
Oh, I
Have you
know this
seen
guy. Yeah, it pops
Big
up a lot.
kilt. Big
Really
kilt.
big
Do you have a
kilt.
good
Lots of
voice?
videos of putting on the kilt. Great voice.
Yeah. Your Sri Lankan friend, does he appear Sri Lankan but has a Scottish accent?
Yeah, more
That's
or less.
the best thing ever. I love that.
Fantastic.
I have a friend up in Steubenville, Ohio, and his mother was from Mexico and his father was from Ireland, and so he got all of his genes from his mother. He looks clearly like he is just straight from Mexico, like he just like everything from just sort of facial features to skin tone and everything. But he's got like all the mannerisms of his like Irish father and wears the little hats and smokes a little pipe, and
That's
it's
funny.
It's good. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Well,
And I don't want to talk about that anymore because we're on a Lord of the Rings Part 2 episode. Lord of the Rings episode Part 2, not the second part of Lord of the Rings, but we do have to give it a catchy title, right?
Yeah.
Something like
I'll come up with
Two
something.
Somethings, because the
Yeah,
first one
Two
was
Somethings.
Fellowship of the
Cross.
Yeah, there you go. So I want to dig in. I want to start, and I do apologize in advance for how much I am going to focus on Justin because his brain, y'all, like it's just a giant,
Amazing.
beautiful
Yeah.
lockbox of Lord of the Rings.
That's very kind.
Everything, yes, yeah, and I mean that is the sincerest compliment I have because I think it's incredibly interesting. I consider myself sort of more of a casual fan. I've read it, I've watched the movies, and I'll be doing it again soon. I've got another child who's almost old enough, so I'm excited about reading through it again.
Nice, yeah.
It's so much fun.
But before we do that, can we just, Cameron, have you read Lord of the Rings?
Oh yeah. No, I haven't.
It's all right. It's all right.
I think I've read like the cover of it.
Okay.
Ooh.
What is that? What did that
That's a start,
say?
man.
It was really interesting. Yeah, it told me the author that I can't remember.
We're off to a great start.
Yeah.
So I want to start talking about something that I mentioned during your fun fact, right? Yes. So what was Aragorn's original almost name?
He was Trotter.
Trotter.
He was a hobbit.
Striding is way cooler than trotting.
Striding
for the
is
record.
way.
Yeah, what's a good point?
So what's up with the distinction in names to begin with?
So Tolkien, as I said, he was a pretty on-off writer. And it's really interesting being like a diehard Tolkien fan because a huge part of it is just going back and reading. Okay, these are all the versions of the story that could have been that weren't. Hence, you get Trotter and stuff. But yeah, I think many years later he came back and said Strider's cooler. And also, if Strider is Aragorn and he's a man and he's the descendant of this line of kings, then we've got a whole underdog like rising up from the ashes.
No, and I'm
kind
sorry,
of
that's what I meant.
there.
The difference between what is he referred to as Strider and then Aragorn? Not Trotter versus Strider, but Strider versus Aragorn.
Well, Aragorn is his true name, given to him by his parents, but he grew up with several names.
Okay.
Because he is, the heir of Isildur of the kingdom of Gondor and Arnor. So the name he grew up with was Estel, which is Elvish for hope.
Okay.
Because he would be the hope for his people. At one point, he's also called Thorongil when he's down in the south and he's fighting with the Rohirrim and against the Haradrim with Gondor. Because he does a lot of world traveling before we even get to Lord of the Rings.
Right. Well, we've got so many of those names with Tolkien, right? With like, is it Mithridir, who's Gandalf, and like I just. What I don't even know where to start with some of these questions because I want to unpack so many of these things and these allegories and these devices that are used by Tolkien. I don't know. Does anybody just want to open us up with one of these cans of worms? So
I have a quick question, if you don't mind.
Please.
How do you know the pronunciation? So is there like a pronunciation guide, or do you listen to people say this? Or?
There is a guide, but for me, honestly, it's a combination of things.
Okay.
Growing up with the movies and loving languages.
Cool.
Spanish is my second language, and Tolkien's R's tend to trill like a Spanish R.
Okay.
So that's handy. Also, the movies and the TV shows, the ones where they're taking the effort to hire someone who knows their stuff.
Sure.
Which has been most of the recent ones. And I've been doing a lot of listening to the audiobooks again recently, as read by Andy Serkis, who also seemed to have done his research.
Very
Does
cool.
Andy Serkis, is he the one who actually reads the audiobooks?
The new ones, yeah. There was this guy back in the 80s or 90s called Rob Inglis. He recorded, and he's got this very traditional, almost like Anglican Church of England kind of reading tone going on. It's great. But just a few years ago, Andy Serkis did a marathon read through of The Hobbit during COVID to raise money for hospitals back in England. And then HarperCollins, the Tolkien publishers, picked him up and said, okay, can you do this for real? And then can you do The Lord of the Rings? Oh, and by the way, can you do the Silmarillion after that, which released a few months ago? And yeah, he's done like the whole lot. And I've almost finished listening through all of them. I'm like halfway through the Silmarillion.
I was going to say, has anybody here read the Silmarillion in its entirety?
No.
Yeah, I knew you had. Have you, Emma?
No.
Ben?
No.
Cameron?
I've read most of it, I think.
You're not allowed to lie, Cameron. Why should I read the Silmarillion?
You should read the Silmarillion because it's essentially a condensed version of the entire history of Middle-earth.
Okay.
Most of the little references you get throughout the Lord of the Rings, especially the book, but also actually in a lot of the audio-visual content. Especially, okay, quick tangent. Rings of Power got a lot of hate and shtick, but
yes,
little details one of those so researched.
On it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, they've been releasing the concept art, and right, the background of one scene, they've got a sword, and they've emblazoned on the design of the sword basically little reliefs of the story of Beren and Luthien, which is first captured in the Silmarillion. So it's this epic mythological saga trying to go up against Norse mythology and Greek mythology and Roman mythology, to tell the whole history of the universe in Tolkien style. And especially as a Catholic podcast, and you know, I'm y'all's resident Protestant, but I think
we're still happy to have you, Justin.
Thank you so much. I think a lot of the clearest Catholic paradigms are left for the Silmarillion.
Right.
Just because of the way Tolkien can take thousands and thousands of years in history and kind of lay it up against, yes, his mythology, but also his creed. It can't help but seep in there, especially as he was writing so much of it towards the latter part of his life, and he started caring a little less about his hatred for allegory, and just letting things flow. For example, and this is one for folks to take away from home, so I don't keep rambling too long.
Please keep
Nienna is one of the Valar, one of the queens of the Valar, the angelic kind of figures of Tolkien's mythology under Eru Elu Vetardo Angar. We spoke a little about that in the first podcast.
Sure.
She has a main attribute of pity. And she's called the Lady of Tears. And I can't help but hear the Lady of Tears and think of Our Lady of
Sorrows. Right, yeah.
Yeah. And her influence on the creation and the rejuvenation of the celestial lights, the two trees of Valinor, Laurelin and Telperion, and then the sun and the moon. Huge thing. I've just been reading the history of Middle-earth, so it's fresh in my head, which is an earlier version of all that. Anyway.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, okay. So I've got a question that I really want to open up to everybody, right? Because when I read Lord of the Rings, and I recently had a discussion with somebody about this, right? When I read Lord of the Rings, it really does seem to me to be so different than, I mean, I understand that it's sort of like the foundation of the modern fantasy, even the modern fantasy tropes. They weren't tropes then, they started then, right? They were all born from Lord of the Rings. But what I see is an examination of ideas and concepts and virtue and vice and men and all of these things that harkens back in a big way to ancient Greek mythology and ancient Roman mythology and Norse mythology. And I know that these are all inspirations or a part of it that were all sort of fresh in Tolkien's head as he's writing these things, right? Because he was a learned guy. But what really seems to stick out to me is the fact that we don't produce things like that anymore. I really do. I think it's a symptom of a sick society, or a sick culture, or a decaying culture, what have you, right? That Western civilization, I do sort of feel like our last great work may have been Lord of the Rings. And that's not just for me to, pump up Tolkien right now, but I'm happy to do that. Do y'all disagree? Like, what are your thoughts on that? That idea of great works, great written works, and what seems to me to be an abandonment of them as a symptom of the decay of the West? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
My initial thought to that would be, as someone who is just recently reading The Lord of the Rings for the first time and thoroughly enjoying it.
Good.
Like, I always knew that it was great writing, but reading, 3 chapters of them just walking through Middle Earth and being engaged in that, instead, walking, my dad likes to say, oh, you can skip around a little bit and jump over parts. If they're just walking, just see it. I'm like, no, I enjoy this. This is a lot of fun.
Dad.
Seeing them go through their day-to-day lives, and just the brilliant way that Tolkien's able to pull you into a story through his writing. And I read a lot of more modern novels. I read through one of the novelization prequels to the Dungeons and Dragons movie that just recently came out. They released 2 novels alongside the movie, both taking place before the events of the movie. And so I read one of those, and so having this work based on Dungeons and Dragons, which Dungeons and Dragons is based off of Lord of the Rings at its foundation. In the original version of Dungeons and Dragons, there were hobbits as a playable race, and then they were sued by Tolkien's estate, and so had to remove it and then change them into halflings
that are just hobbits.
That are just hobbits. They're just hobbits. They also tried to sue Wizards of the Coast for the use of dragons but of course they lost that. But so having this work that is not intentionally influenced by this other work, that I can absolutely see the beauty of this one thing, like the prequel book to Dungeons and Dragons. It's called A Druid's Tale. It's a really beautiful story. It's, you know, it's not the best. But then you go back to Lord of the Rings, which is just this deep, like it feels like it's been mulled over and worked on. And from what I know about Tolkien and how he worked on Lord of the Rings is he was not satisfied. He was never satisfied with his writing. He would always go back and make changes. Like when I heard a conversation between him and Chronicles of Narnia. C.S. Lewis.
That's a great conversation.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis is kind of in the mindset of he's going to finish this and put it out. And he was always writing new things and putting out books. And so you have this enormous collection of works by C.S. Lewis. And then Tolkien is a much more reserved, really wanted to make sure everything was intentional. And so it really comes out. And I think a major part, kind of going back to your question of why we've lost that and why we're not seeking that out, is because of the advent of, you know, YouTube and TikTok and watching things, and how visual entertainment and auditory entertainment has overtaken kind of the pop culture as we know it. And so you have these things like Lord of the Rings and the Chronicles of Narnia, these amazing works that are written falling at the wayside because they're hard to get through. Like Lord of the Rings, it's fantastic, and it's, you know, it's not the most challenging read, but for someone that's doesn't read often and doesn't read for pleasure most times, or like people coming out of high school and only reading when they are told to read, basically, it's hard to get them into something that is generally hard to chew on at first, and you have to really chew on it to get the meaning out of it. Like you really have to
I like that. I like that analogy, because I think of it and I think of sort of modern young adult novels or something, and how just I don't know, just ideas and concepts are being spoon fed to you, and they're heavy handed. And I think you mentioned this earlier, but Tolkien's dislike of allegory, right, and things like that. It's just something that is tangibly different when I read it in the way it makes me feel. And maybe some of that is just it feels fancy and whatever, but I think there's something deeper to it. Yeah, I agree with you.
I heard a quote by an author I know fairly well, Greg Wilts, who said that the voice of an author comes from the editing, not the writing. And that kind of struck me, like thinking through it. And so you have these books that a lot of the time now they're pushed by publishers to just get it out. You know, let's edit it once, twice, and then get it out. Or
produce
give it
content.
Yeah, write it, give it to an editor. They will edit it for you and then publish it. While you have people like Tolkien who spent years editing the material after they had written it. And so, you know, if he had just written that first draft and passed it on to an editor, Aragorn would not be called Strider and would not be called Aragorn. And so it is in that this is truly a work that had time and effort put into it and passion behind it.
And I think
where the greatness comes from.
Yeah, and I think you kind of touched on something. So, you know, talking about like with technology, the advent of technology, and like that is like there's so much more distraction for us now. There's less time to think, if you will, because we're always, you know, got something else to do. And so, you know, would Tolkien have been able to do all that writing and come up with a whole language and then write a whole book around that, you know, and just add so much detail and so many little themes and things to touch on if he had YouTube back then, or, you know, if, you know, Xbox Series X just came out.
Right.
You know, so there's the modern mind, we're so distracted. There's always something to take us away from our interior life. That we are seeing like music is not as emotional, it's not as deep, it's not as entertaining.
There's an attempt to speak to our baser passions in so much of what's I was thinking about Lord of the Rings, and a lot of times you'll hear it modern day be compared to Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah.
In Game of Thrones, it's like this desperate attempt to be gritty and adult, and there's all these explicit parts and all of these things that were not necessary, right? And they weren't included in Lord of the Rings at all, right?
Yeah.
And Lord of the Rings still seems to have achieved that which the Game of Thrones could not.
Yeah. When did he start writing those books?
George R.R. Martin?
Yeah, wasn't that like in the 80s and 90s?
Yeah.
The first one came out in 96.
Oh, 96.
Well, I only know because I was born in 96.
Okay.
It's one of those fun facts.
Okay.
That was a good
year you were born.
That was a good year.
Yeah.
I remember 96. 96 was a great year.
Pokemon?
The Olympics.
Hey Arnold. Yeah. Big fan of Hey Arnold. Yeah.
And I believe like the original, like the Silmarillion was born from like the notes of Tolkien, basically.
Oh,
and like
wow, yeah.
from that editing and removing of things and having to go back and add
Wasn't his
context
son,
to his
Christopher,
world.
the one who finished that up?
Yeah, I believe so. And as someone like I've talked about it many times on the show. I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, or I try to play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. But when I'm not playing Dungeons and Dragons, I'm thinking about it, and I'm creating a world that my players can play in. Like I've mapped out a world with town names, and of course, it's very Tolkien inspired because most of fantasy medieval is now. And so I absolutely get like my players will almost never come close to touching all of the world that I've created and the things I've written and the backstory I've put into these places.
Oh, great.
However, the fact that I have put that time and effort into them makes the world my players interact with feel so much deeper. Right. And it's this phrase that's like, write a story in a small world that exists within an incredibly large universe.
Right.
Like that you don't have to see the universe to feel how big it is.
Right.
Yeah. And I think Tolkien does that beautifully.
Lord of the Rings has inspired all of these different things, right? Everything from, we talked about Game of Thrones, we talked about D&D, just the modern fantasy genre in general.
Including Led Zeppelin.
Is that right?
Led Zeppelin was very influenced by Lord of the Rings.
Dio.
They have like Misty Mountains in their songs.
Yeah.
They talk about Gollum. So because of that, because Tolkien is a Catholic, I think that makes
Led Zeppelin
a Catholic band.
band.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Very
I'll
cool.
take it. Cool.
I think so.
Yeah, we could have a whole episode on that. I like that. But here's my question, because you get a lot of people who will say about D&D in particular, or Harry Potter or anything, they'll say, well, it's demonic, right? Because there's magic. Right. There's magic and it's not of God. There is no God. There's no triune God in those books. So there's some demonic whatever. How do you respond? I mean, first of all, I'm not on that team. I'm not at all going to say D&D is demonic. I think that's ridiculous, actually. But if someone's opinion about Lord of the Rings is the same as their opinion about Harry Potter or D&D or whatever, and they say, no, there's all this magic stuff, the non-miraculous magic, therefore it's pagan, it's witchcraft, it's demonic, it supports that. How do you respond to that? Justin's already making a face. You don't...
I'm going to make it real fast, and then I'm really curious what you think, Emma. But vehemently, especially someone coming from the movies is why, but vehemently opposed. I agree. Vehemently opposed, especially when it comes to The Lord of the Rings and Narnia, for that matter, because they're coming from Christian authors, but also because, especially with Lord of the Rings, the magic is kind of miraculously based, at least the good magic.
Sure.
And the bad magic, if you were going to put it that way, is quite deliberately that version of demonically based, not hellish demonically. But when Tolkien put this universe together, and it's one extra reason to read the Silmarillion, it is so Judeo-Christian in its bones.
Right.
Like there is one God, and the powers that there are can only come from him. And I remember talking last time about how even the way evil is portrayed as what's corrupt, you know, like Lucifer in the fall, it's written all over it. So yeah, I'm strongly against that. I'd say to anyone who was like, I will have no magic, well, make Lord of the Rings your exception, make Narnia maybe your exception.
Yeah,
I've had kids tell me that their parents won't let them read it because of all that, and it really does. It breaks my heart, right?
They're missing the context, because like I was just gonna bring that up as well. Like there is goodness, and like goodness is God. It's all supernatural. Like it is above us. It is above the natural. It's like divine. And like evil, in a sense, is not natural either, and it's a corruption of what is good. And then in the Silmarillion, it explains like the root of the evil and stuff, and the whole plan is to is it Morgoth that makes the music that like he strings it into someone's song of creation to like corrupt it?
So Eru Ilúvatar begins it, the Ainur, which are the Valar, and the Maiar, his angelic beings, they continue it. Morgoth at this point is still Melkor, and he's like the best and most beautiful and strongest of the Ainur. And yeah, he begins weaving in this stronger contrary theme. and it happens a few times over.
Yeah. So it's like similar to in Narnia, Aslan like sings to create Narnia,
Right.
and the kids like witness him doing that. So it's like the evil is like inserting a corruption in order to create what is evil, and it's not even creation, it's corruption. So like if someone is
not create,
saying right off the bat,
exactly.
this is the issue, is they're missing the context. Like if I hear from my friend who I go to get coffee with, oh, I heard that Lord of the Rings has dragons, so because someone I knew watched The Hobbit and said there was dragons in it, I don't let my kids watch it because it's evil. Like that's missing the context, because the dragons are inherently evil. All the dragons are inherently evil. There's no dragon portrayed as good and just trying to like prove that it's good. It's like you have the goodness, you have the higher divine beings like eagles that have a purpose for like divine things, and then you have a corruption of that creation, which is dragons, which are used for inherently evil purposes and like work with evil only. And like even the elves spent so many years fighting dragons, and like this, you probably know the battle, I don't know what war it was that they were fighting dragons, but yeah, so like they're missing the context. And that's the same thing with like things like Narnia and stuff. Like they're just missing it. If it's now, this is the difference, is like you have Game of Thrones. Dragons are not inherently evil in Game of Thrones. They're depicted as good or bad, right?
Right. They're just animals.
There's animals that are used,
yeah.
which is taking something that originated as like an evil creature, and even in that comes from the Bible. You know, the one of the symbols of the devil is a dragon, and it's like all of a sudden it's depicted as good. Lord of the Rings is something that never does that. Narnia never does that, and they brought up a good point about like the magic itself. Like I think one thing that people don't like about Harry Potter is the magic is kind of used in the same way, I think, sort of, and then it's like the person depicts whether or not they use the magic for good or bad, but anyone could pick it up and learn it. But like what the elves do and stuff, it's like, sorry, if an elf were to go and pick up like the dark practices that like happen in Mordor, that elf would be immediately corrupted by that and become evil. Like It's this fine line of good is good and bad is bad, and if good were to venture into bad, it becomes bad. And it's like, yeah, so I think like it's kind of that way of looking at it, as where the lines being blurred.
Yeah.
Like Lord of the Rings never blurs
That's a really
lines.
interesting distinction too between magic and Lord of the Rings and magic and something like Harry Potter. I'm not here to say Harry Potter is super evil. I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying I'm not weighing in on that right now.
I don't have any opinions about it.
But yeah, all right, Cameron, what you got?
Yeah, well,
so excited about Cameron talking right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was gonna say,
Can we zoom in on Cameron when he talks?
I did actually prepare for this, and I read both parts of the book. The Lord likes to sing, I think is what we're talking about, right? Yeah, it's Jesus and the Jesus singing.
Right. Yeah, that's the one.
Really, Greek mythology ties into it. And yeah, it's a really good book. Yeah, if you haven't read it.
So those are your thoughts? Okay, cool.
I've been watching Lord of the Dance. I didn't know.
I think they go together. I think
Okay.
there's some kind of ties in there. Yeah, there's some cameos.
So can we just, I don't know, like seriously, not even trying to be funny here, just like take a minute and tell Cameron why he should read Lord of the Rings?
Oh yeah,
Dude, if you didn't listen to like my rant just a minute ago about why the great writing is so great, it brings you in with literally just them walking around for a little while.
Yeah.
I think the only point in the book where I could say I got quote unquote bored.
Don't you dare.
Or it was the Council of Elrond.
Oh, good. I thought you were going to talk about my boy TB. I thought you were going to talk about Tom Bombadil.
No, dude, I was in.
Don't
with Tom
throw
Bombadil.
shade at Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, I could see Justin getting a little mad at me, and I kind of when Gandalf started talking, I was in at that point.
It's the Council of Elrond, like talking to like the little nuggets that really come from the Silmarillion. You get so many of these huge figures throughout the history of this universe coming together for one of the only times.
Yeah,
interesting.
And just laying it all out, like, and especially re-listening to it recently, like the emphasis on the lore and the knowledge that these people have had and they're only just now sharing. Yeah. No, I love it. It's got a Lego set now, if that didn't help.
It does. It's like $500.
Producer Ben is also uncultured swine, apparently. I'm just kidding, Ben. I'm a big fan. So why should Cameron read it?
Is there like a way to sort of engulf what this plot is?
Well, you don't even know the plot of Lord of the Rings.
Have you not seen any of the movies, Cameron?
It's
Wikipedia, man.
I know. I probably should have before I came in here.
I don't think you need to. I
Wait,
think
you don't know the plot of Lord of the Rings?
No.
It's a pretty simple plot. I think you can just read it.
You should just read
really?
it. Totally, dude.
Yeah.
Just jump in. Like that's
Okay.
the best
Without
thing.
knowing?
Like when the movie The Sixth Sense is
jealous
quite
right
old
now.
at this
I
point.
know.
It's
It's
for the first
experienced it for
time.
the first time.
The movie The Sixth Sense is quite old and well known at this point that it's very rare that someone doesn't know kind of the twist.
What are you talking
Like,
about? The sixth what? I'm sorry.
This of The Sixth Sense, but I went into it completely blind.
Oh, nice.
Not knowing
Wow.
anything about the movie. And
The
watched
twist
it
is that
and
Bruce
was
Willis is allergic to water.
amazed.
And when they throw water on him, he dies.
Yep, that's it.
Just kidding. That's another M. Night Shyamalani
M.
twist.
Night Shyamalan
Sorry,
movie.
go ahead.
But yeah, but
You didn't know that when you watched it the first
No,
time?
I didn't
Oh,
know that
that's
when
so
I
cool.
watched it
That
for the
was
first
cool.
time. Yeah,
I was like in 6th grade and I saw it.
I remember that.
And I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
But for that same reason, I think, Cameron, you should read Lord of the Rings because you don't know what happens.
Right.
You have yet to experience this story. You have yet to have it ruined by simply people telling you about it or, watching the movies as a kid. But I envy you that you know nothing to the story that you can jump in blind.
I'm amazed. I mean, it's almost like not knowing that Darth Vader is Luke Skywalker's dad at this point. I just thought it was
Hold
so
on.
ingrained.
Hang on a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
So Santa's still real.
Yeah. That's not addressed in
Okay.
Well, it kind of is, actually. But
Yeah,
That's Narnia.
you'll get there. Yeah, I'm sorry. You're right. Narnia is where
Narnia.
Santa's there.
The cool thing though is that even with talking about it, you guys haven't spoiled a single bit of it because I don't know all the different names, all the different stories and stuff. But it's very apparent that there is a much deeper attraction to it than just a good story. It seems like there's a lot more behind the scenes, and that's like equally as drawing in.
A lot of allegory and
Yeah.
like deeper themes that just like come to light that like make you not just reflect on the story or even the biblical story, but even on your own life.
Yeah.
And so it's really enchanting in that way.
Yeah, well, that's a good word. I know some of the best stories are the ones where you can see yourself in the story, and almost like as you're reading, everything just kind of fades away, and you're just kind of left alone.
The copy of the book that I'm reading belonged to my parents. Like it's from my parents' library.
Oh, wow.
And so every couple pages or when something really cool happens, there will be a little writing that my mom put in that's like, this is awesome. Or like what she thought about this specific line.
Yeah.
And so things like that. So it's like I'm reading along with my mom at times.
That's
It's a lot of
amazing.
fun. Yeah.
My first copies were from my mom as well. She got me into it. And I was going to say for you, Cameron, at its deepest, you can go so deep because so much was put into creating all this. But even at the very least, it's an incredible, compelling adventure story with real, humanity in it, real virtue. And it's absolutely in a world you can completely get lost in with characters you can completely fall in love with, or come to dread, just as the figures in this story are. I mean, I'm going to tell people all to live lonely, read it. But I will say, if you don't read for pleasure so often, and maybe you do, I am actually a proponent of see the movie, then read the book.
Absolutely.
I was
Really?
sick on that because I
please.
have not read the
Really?
books. I haven't. I read like the first 2 chapters and then I can't. I'm not good with reading. So I'm one of those people. I don't want to corrupt you, man. Read the books first if you can, but I like watching the movies first and then reading books. Like that's what I did with Narnia. But I watched the movies many times, and when we first watched it, we watched it as a family, and it just like completely captivated me.
That's
in a
not
way.
true. The first time you watched it,
I was in the womb.
You were in
That's
the womb.
true.
That's the
I
first
was in
time
the
you
womb.
moved.
My mom went, and I was in the womb, and I was like doing flips and freaking out. And she was like, "Do I have to leave the movie theater?" So,
Is that
long
why your
time
middle
lover.
name's Arwen? Is that-
But
That's
yeah,
cool.
even like just the movies, like they honored Tolkien and everything they did and all the work, because like the work that they put into the movies, like I honestly think it's a cinematic masterpiece. And if you watch like even just the what is it called, the appendices of everything, like how they made it, like that just it's further on that theme of sub creation, right, which is like Tolkien's whole thing. But even if you just watch the movies, like it's not even just like one of those things where you watch a movie and you see yourself in the movie and it like really sucks you and it like takes you above yourself. Like it's what converted me. Like it's how I found God and like it took me a while to like realize that. But like I don't know. God just knew me really well, and like Lord of the Rings was the way he got me again, because like it takes you out of yourself and above in a way that like no other story or movie's ever gonna do that. And it's like all the intentionality and like the creation that goes into it, which like earlier we were talking about the way that like our culture doesn't do that anymore is because our culture doesn't like create in the same way, right. Even if at all. Like I agree totally. Like the whole thing about Lord of the Rings, and like Tolkien spoke on this, is that he was sub-creating, and like he didn't want it to be an allegory, and it ended up being like riddled with his faith, because like he was created by God and then he sub-created, and that like reflected a fractal of an image of the God who created him. And like all that deep intentionality and like the ruminating and like the passion, like if a man created a whole world and like all these books and a history with that is a drop compared to the vast ocean of love and intentionality that God created all of us within this world. And like, think about it. It's like the quote that Ben used. Think of the universe, man. They say it's like constantly expanding. All of that, and yet here we are. And then this tiny little earth in all of the universe, and it all started with a priest in my church like explains like Israel to people, like it was like this backwater like country that like was different from the rest, and like everyone else was just like pagan. It was like this backwater place that had one God. It was super weird. Like in all of that world, he picked this small place to be like his people, and in all of that he picked a baby, and he came through the womb of a woman as like he was in the womb, and then a baby in a manger. And like God is so deeply intentional with that, and like it's all about like the creation itself. And like Tolkien is one of the last people that I think I could think of that ever reached that kind of level of sub-creation, and people don't do anymore because they're filled with meaningless creation all the time. You sit there on TikTok and it's TikTok creators, YouTube creators, like influencers, creators. You're being influenced and creations are thrown at you. None of it has any meaning at all. And the ones that hit you the most are either created with the most bad intentions or the most good intentions. Like when someone pops up on your feed and is like basically evangelizing or like saying something really inspirational, or like people that like put intentionality into it, then it like you're like, oh, that gave me chills. It was so good. But that's like but a taste of what things used to be. So like that's what our culture is missing, is creation, because no one creates anymore. And like kids, they grow up and their imaginations are being numbed out by like things that are just meaningless. And like honestly, like everything is carnal now, you know? And like if you look at, I mean, we were talking about Game of Thrones earlier, like it misses the intentionality because most people's intentions are so focused on carnal things that it's like it's what you wear, what you do with your body, what you put in your body, like how your identity and all these things, like creating it for yourself, but it's like all the while you're being completely influenced. And like that's what's missing, and that's what like Tolkien offers. So if you're not a book guy and you know you're gonna read that first chapter and give up on it, try, but watch the movies at the very least. Yeah. Everyone can watch a movie, and absolutely. I can tell you that it will inspire you in some way or another, because like it inspired the crap out of me. So.
That is why Emma was on the show today. That was awesome.
That's all I have to say, because I didn't read the books.
No, but seriously, and I don't want to be that guy, because this sounds cliche when I say it. It is infinitely rewatchable / rereadable. And I don't feel that way about movies. Hardly ever. Yeah. Hardly ever.
I have watched it many times, dude.
It's so good. And it's one of those things where you are always finding something new and making a connection. And Peter Jackson, right, who directed it and had such, I mean, to just say he directed it is really doing him a disservice, right? How invested he was in that film. I really believe, I might have said this the last time we discussed this, it was made at the, and I'm not going to say divine inspiration here, but it was made at just the right time. If it were made right now, it would be bogged down by so much of the stuff that Emma was just talking about. If it were made a decade before, the CGI, and it would never, you wouldn't have been as immersed in it. It is the perfect like mix of incredible story with good CGI without a lot of political or social messaging in it. It's just this beautiful story of adventure and what it means to be a human. And I can go on all day.
I wouldn't have mind. I don't mind the animatronic like machine, like the puppetry. I don't mind that stuff. So I think even an earlier one could have been cool too.
There was the Beatles tried to make a Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. I spoke a little about that last time.
They did.
Oh, really? Didn't know that.
Yeah, but Tolkien hated the Beatles.
So I want to kind of take the conversation and go back to kind of the Dungeons and Dragons side of things. Because
I just want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons.
We haven't done a Dungeons and Dragons show yet.
We need to.
We say all the time that Dungeons and Dragons is very inspired by Lord of the Rings, and it very much is directly. But there was a point in the book that this was pointed out to me, and it absolutely works, where it feels as though Lord of the Rings is inspired by Dungeons and Dragons.
Heresy.
And it is the introduction of Tom Bombadil.
Oh, Tom
Simply
Bombadil.
because Tom Bombadil narratively feels like a dungeon master putting his players in a situation they're not qualified for, and there's no way they're going to survive. And he's like, oh, crap. What do I do? I don't want him to die here. Okay, this dude, here we go. He's, forest guy. Throw him in. Oh, he saved him. Look at there. You guys are okay now. Not discounting how fantastic Tom Bombadil is. I freaking love him.
I have really mixed emotions on Tom Bombadil just because he's such a confusing character. I talked about this last time. I like Tom Bombadil, but one of the most head-scratching scenes of the whole thing is like, hey, forest guy, oh, that ring of great power that corrupts everyone. Look, he's wearing it on and laughing, and now he takes it off, and then it's weird.
I think it's another allegory. It's just
stop trying to give Tolkien allegories. He's mad at you right now.
I think it's another theme, or he's just pointing us beyond himself, and that way we can call it a sacrament, if you will. The sacramentology of the story is that he's pointing us beyond the story to in a way God, who is in our story, but beyond it as well. Who he has power to bring about miracles, to make changes, but sometimes he steps back, and like evil has no effect on him. And he's still present to us, but
I've never heard that Tom Bombadil take. I like that.
Well, he has a reason, a purpose, where he allows things to happen a certain way, and we actually see that in the greater story of Lord of the Rings, where Frodo shows mercy to Gollum, right? And then at the end, you see Frodo is not able to carry out the whole. Like, he gives everything he has to this mission. And this is actually from a talk that Tolkien gave once on like how Frodo didn't make it, but still, because he gave everything to it, like divine providence, if you will, helped him, complete that mission. And so we could even say too, like if we are giving our whole heart and intending to follow God and carry out His mission for us. And, if we give everything to what we have, then that's all we can do. And so that's what Frodo did. He gave everything. And then it turned out that Gollum, whom he had mercy on the whole journey, he never killed, right? Even though he could have, even especially with the elves and the trees, I think, like towards the end of Two Towers, he says, no, don't kill him. He's my friend. Like that's how the ring gets destroyed. That's how the mission is carried out. And who knows? That could have been Tom Bombadil's design. I don't know the lore like you do.
Okay. So
tell us the right answer.
There's a lot of truth to that. I want to start with that. There's a lot of truth to that, but less as involves Tom Bombadil.
Okay.
Because I have heard
Tom Bombadil is king.
Tom Bombadil is a god-like figure, and theories that he is like an embodiment of Eru Ilúvatar, who's the god.
That's right.
but they're unfortunately wrong.
I have a statement.
And it's largely wrong because Tolkien said so.
Okay, absolutely.
But what Tom Bombadil does kind of represent, you were saying like he's a head scratcher and he confuses you. That's the idea. He's the capital M mystery. Tolkien threw him in for a couple of reasons. One, he'd already created him a long time ago and he wanted him in this story. So he had his OC and he threw it in, like you're saying, with a Dungeons and Dragons kind of DM plot. But two, Bombadil is in there early and just before our hobbits are going to encounter their first kind of adversity, like real, this is us, we're not just hearing about adversity. And he's a force for good and he's a force for nature because these are mysterious, like introducing the mysterious powers of this universe. So yes, there's something about Tom Bombadil, like they call him oldest and fatherless. Like in the Council of Elrond scene, one more reason it's great because they try and explain him and they're like, we're never going to explain him, never mind. So he does kind of embody a bit of that. I've heard a good theory that maybe he embodies an incarnation of the music of the Ainur, still living fresh in Middle-earth, because he's got like this very limited power over his domain of nature, but it seems limitless in that limited geography. He can wear the ring, he can laugh around with it, it has no power on him, but equally, if they gave it to him, they say he'd probably just forget about it. So outside of his influence. So, but that's one more reason why he didn't work as a god figure is because he's a bit too detached.
Well, my thought is, and you know more, so correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of what I think differs between Lewis and Tolkien is that Lewis, it's like all his themes are kind of like connected and you can kind of they follow in that world. But I always seem to be like Tolkien just had a bunch of themes that he wanted to include. So he just wrote this story and then he like kind of shaped it in clay. And so you have like the lambda, was it lambda, the bread?
Ambus bread?
Ambus bread, what am I saying? So you have the bread that kind of points to the Eucharist. And then you have like a prophecy with Aragorn. And you have like, King Theoden and how he is, kind of possessed in a way by Sauron. And then in a way, then you have Gandalf come in and almost like cast out the demon and exorcise him, which I honestly, like if you read Lord of the Rings with the charismatic like perspective, it's really,
you can get right in there.
You can get really in there, but yeah.
But even from the other end, what I was going to speak to in terms of that divine influence, it's a little more biblical.
Yeah.
And even outside of the Silmarillion, which is very biblical in tone, like deliberately, the syntax and the way that sense is constructed. But there's all of these little snippets where someone gets a dream or someone gets a feeling that seems to come out of nowhere. And Tolkien almost describes it as such, like especially with Frodo in Mordor or elsewhere, something that tells them turn left or not right.
Yeah.
That's a bit more of the divine kind of the discernment, the spiritual movement. And I think it's one of the ways that Tolkien couldn't hide his faith because he couldn't write a universe that didn't have a little of that, that supernatural, that higher influence.
So I would love to spend the next hour dissecting this, but unfortunately we are already at time and we got to put a pin in this thing. So I would love to, instead of just doing cards or something, Lord of the Rings, hot takes, like unpopular maybe opinions on something, pretty quick and concise. Cameron, you're exempt.
Okay.
I'm going to start. I think that the dwarves are the most relatable, more so than the humans. And I don't know what that says about me, but yeah, I get it. I get the Gimlis of the world 100%, especially that scene in the Mines of Moria where he finds out that his whole family's been wiped out and his cousin's dead and all that. Like I don't know. I've just always had this. Maybe it's because of the sins that I personally struggle with and pride and like this desire for this disordered self-sufficiency and all of these things. And the greed and I don't know. I look at the dwarves and I'm like, man, how'd you write this story about me, Tolkien? That's weird. And I don't like that about myself, but that's my hot take. I think the dwarves are the most relatable. Yeah. What about you, Emma? You got a hot take?
I don't know. I'm not good with stuff on the spot. It was like my 5 fun facts all over again.
Think about it while Thomas gives us his.
Yeah, you go.
Okay, well, just go into what you were saying with the dwarfs. My hot take is I liked the Hobbit movies. I thought they were entertaining.
Okay, yeah, they were entertaining.
They were entertaining, and you could point out the parts. Well, if you read the Hobbit, absolutely. But like again, that wasn't in the book. Obviously, this is kind of. But even those parts, I thought were kind of fun.
I thought the 1980s animated Hobbit was phenomenal. I love it. That was my first.
Except they massacre the names is my only issue, but otherwise I did.
But that was my first entry to Lord of the Rings was the 1980s awfully animated Hobbit movie. I thought it was fantastic. I still have it. Still has a dear place in my heart. Yeah,
it is a classic. I'm gonna bounce off your hot take and repeat an earlier point.
You hated the Hobbit movies.
You're gonna talk about Rings of Power, aren't you, Justin?
I really enjoyed the Hobbit movies, and for similar reasons, I enjoyed the Rings of Power. I watched them through twice, and I think it's because, no, they can't fit in everything. And yes, they've cut up a lot, especially in terms of the timeline. They had to deliberately condense hundreds of years into a few weeks. I don't know what they say they go for. There's a pun about it in the last episode of season 1. But also, yeah, all those little nuggets. There's a lot of love and care went into it. And I feel really bad for all those creators that really tried to do it justice with the source material and just got trampled on because it wasn't.
Are they not making it anymore? Is it done?
Oh, they are. They're going to make 5 seasons.
They're doing 5 seasons?
Yeah. I mean, they got all the money.
Out right now?
One's out. The next one's coming next year. Oh. And after that, we'll see. But they're lined up for 5.
Okay. And so I'm glad you're here because maybe you can shed some light on this. But this is why I didn't like Rings of Power is how they handled Galadriel.
Ooh, okay.
I just thought they were heavy-handed with all the modernist stuff. That's why I didn't like it.
So it isn't too far from Silmarillion Galadriel,
but
it really
like
extrapolates. Now, she's a little like that. Uh-huh. There's this idea that she has survived a lot. She's a warrior. Uh-huh. There's an idea that she's incredibly wise. And there's also this avarice in her. She wants, it says in the early Silmarillion, a land and a place and a power of her own, or authority of her own. Mm-hmm. And that's the Galadriel I think they've kind of leaned into, but very far compared to the source material. But I'm interested, is what I am, by that kind of angle on it. But yeah.
What about you, Emma? What you got?
I'm going to just hop on that because I loved the Hobbit movies. And actually, Kay, this is one thing you guys can't shade me on. I have read The Hobbit 3 times.
No.
What?
Hobbit's
Oh my
great.
gosh, I heard a plug.
If you're reading Lord of the Rings, especially with children, you must start with The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Get them introduced to the universe in a more easy to understand sort of way before you get into long names and councils and all these things. The Hobbit does a great job.
I started in Lord of the Rings, and then I was just kind of up in Dahlonega one day and had to kill some time and had nothing. I just needed to kill some time, so I went to the Catholic Center, and they had a copy of The Hobbit on the shelf, and so I was like, cool, I'll hop into this real quick, and was just, astounded on how quickly they just get going with it.
Yep.
In Lord of the Rings, it takes 30 years to get even, an inch forward, and then, you're 5 pages into The Hobbit, and there's 3 dwarves sitting in Bilbo's kitchen. Yeah, Yeah.
Do you have a hot take, Ben, to close us out?
Hot take? I don't think I'm deep enough into it to have a hot take about it. I don't like Rings of Power. I've watched the first episode and it did nothing for me.
I watched the first 2 episodes and then I decided that while I wanted to watch the other ones, I hated it so much that I didn't want Amazon to get my one view because they might make more if I supported them. So while I have Prime, maybe I'll pirate the rest of the Rings of Power just to prove a point.
I thought it was interesting. I liked some of the things they were introducing, but I think overall it did not capture the same spirit that Peter Jackson's movies did. It feels a lot more like feels a lot more fairy tale like in the Rings of Power. It feels a lot more like a fairy tale than I think the movies did, which is they felt much more grounded and like I could see myself living in that universe. While Rings of Power, it felt so much further away than to me.
Yeah, I agree. And also it reminds me, I have 2 thoughts on this really quick. It reminds me of I don't know if you guys have seen the Narnia movies, but the third one, because Fox bought it out. That's how it feels for me with Amazon doing Rings of Power. It's like when Narnia was bought from Disney, dropped it, and then Fox picked it up and made Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and you're like, eh.
Yeah.
Also, my little analogy thing for this is like you have if like Rings of Power was like all of Tolkien's collected works in a book, and like a kid with peanut butter all over its hands picked up the book and started reading, flipping through the pages. To me, that's what it is. It could have been really good, but Amazon's the person with peanut butter all over the hands, and it's like Fox.
We will do a future episode after our third installment of Lord of the Rings about Rings of Power. Well, Justin will defend it against everyone's assault.
I will do my darndest.
But that is all the time we have today, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all, thank you so much for being here. This has been a blast. Once again, I wish we could spend 4 hours doing this. This has been amazing. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This has been Honest to God on AM 1160 The Quest, Atlanta's Catholic Radio. Producer Ben.
Signing off.
Over and out.